My child, something has shifted quietly between you and this person, and the most important part may be hidden inside what neither of you has been able to say. Stay here for a moment, because this is not about chasing someone, forcing an outcome, or holding on to a connection that no longer brings peace. It is about recognizing the difference between a bond that asks you to lose yourself and one that may simply be passing through a season of uncertainty. Somewhere beneath the silence, beneath the pauses, beneath those moments when you wondered whether you should keep believing in what you once felt, there is a question your heart keeps returning to: was everything between you truly meaningless, or did something real begin that neither of you completely understood at the time? Don't skip, because the answer is not going to arrive as one dramatic revelation. It is going to appear slowly, through the details you may have overlooked. Think about the way this person entered your thoughts without needing to demand your attention. Think about the conversations that felt strangely effortless, the moments when ordinary words seemed to carry more meaning than they should have, the quiet sense that something about this connection was different even when you could not explain why. Perhaps that is why walking away emotionally has not been as simple as you expected. You may have told yourself to forget. You may have tried to become indifferent. You may even have reached a place where you thought, maybe I should stop hoping altogether. And yet some small part of you kept asking for clarity rather than closure. That difference matters. Because sometimes the heart does not keep returning to a person because it is meant to suffer for them. Sometimes it returns because there is still an unfinished understanding waiting to become clear. And tonight, metaphorically speaking, imagine that understanding standing quietly at the edge of everything you thought you knew. It is not shouting. It is not demanding that you believe anything blindly. It is simply asking you to look again. Something important is waiting for you in that second look. You see, when people say, "This person is yours," it can sound as though love is about possession, but meaningful love is never ownership. The deeper meaning is different. It means there may be a person whose presence fits naturally beside the life you are becoming, someone whose path may continue crossing yours because both of you still have something genuine to discover. And perhaps the reason you have felt so confused is that you expected recognition to feel simple. You imagined that when the right person appeared, everything would immediately fall into place. No hesitation. No distance. No questions. Yet real human connection can be more complicated than that. Two people can care deeply and still become quiet. Two people can recognize something meaningful and still need time to understand what it asks of them. Two people can move toward each other emotionally while their circumstances, timing, fears, responsibilities, or personal growth seem to move in another direction. That does not automatically mean the connection is destined to continue, but neither does temporary uncertainty erase everything meaningful that existed. And this is where your story becomes more interesting. There may have been a moment, small enough that you almost forgot it, when this person revealed more than they intended. Perhaps it was the way their voice changed when the conversation became personal. Perhaps it was how carefully they remembered something you mentioned only once. Perhaps it was the strange stillness that appeared whenever the possibility of losing contact became real. These things are not proof of a predetermined future, but they can be clues to emotional truth. Stay till the end, because there is one particular realization hidden inside those clues that changes how you may understand their distance. The silence you interpreted as indifference may not have been as simple as indifference. Sometimes people become quiet precisely because they have reached a feeling they do not yet know how to carry. Imagine this person alone with their thoughts after one of your conversations. The room becomes quieter. Their phone is nearby. Your name remains in their mind longer than they expected. They begin replaying something you said, not because it was dramatic, but because it touched a place inside them that had been guarded for a long time. Maybe you told them something honest about your dreams. Maybe you showed kindness when you had no reason to. Maybe you understood something about them without requiring an explanation. Whatever the moment was, it created a question they were not prepared to answer. What if this person actually matters to me more than I planned? And here is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Their uncertainty may not have begun when their feelings became weaker. It may have begun when those feelings became harder to dismiss. Think about that carefully. Sometimes emotional distance appears after closeness, not because closeness meant nothing, but because closeness made something visible. When people suddenly recognize that another person could genuinely affect their future, they sometimes slow down. They examine themselves. They question whether they are ready. They wonder whether the connection can survive the reality of everyday life instead of existing only as a beautiful possibility. And if you have been standing on the other side of that silence, you may have mistaken reflection for rejection. You may have thought you were being forgotten when this person was actually trying to understand why remembering you had become so effortless. But there is another layer, and this one is about you. Somewhere during this connection, you changed. Maybe subtly. You became clearer about what you deserve from communication. You began recognizing the difference between being chosen peacefully and constantly trying to earn someone's attention. You started understanding that love should not require you to shrink, perform, or abandon your own direction. That growth matters, because if this person does return closer to your life, the version of you meeting them now should not be the version who waits without boundaries. It should be the version who can care deeply while still respecting themselves. This is why "don't give up" does not mean keep chasing. Hear that distinction. It means do not give up on the possibility of honest communication simply because uncertainty has made you tired. Do not give up on your own capacity to love wisely. Do not turn one confusing chapter into a permanent conclusion before you have enough information to understand what actually happened. But equally, do not abandon your peace in order to preserve a fantasy. The connection must eventually meet you in reality. Words must become actions. Interest must become consistency. Care must be allowed to exist openly rather than surviving only through guesses. And something inside this person may be approaching that same realization. There comes a point when silence stops protecting people from vulnerability and starts costing them something they genuinely value. There comes a moment when a person who has been thinking quietly begins to understand that waiting forever for the perfect words could mean never saying what mattered. Perhaps they are not standing at your door. Perhaps they are not composing some dramatic confession this very second. Keep this grounded. But emotionally, there may be a shift happening in the way you understand each other, especially if communication begins again with more honesty than before. What if the next chapter is not about repeating the old pattern at all? What if it is about two people finally meeting without the assumptions that complicated the beginning? That possibility is more meaningful than any fantasy because it asks both people to grow. And now consider something you may not have considered before. Perhaps this connection was never asking you to wait helplessly. Perhaps it was asking you to become ready for clarity. There is a difference. Waiting places your life on hold. Readiness allows your life to keep expanding while leaving room for truth when it arrives. So keep moving. Keep building. Keep becoming more fully yourself. Let this person reveal who they are through what they choose to do next. You do not need to predict it. You do not need to control it. You only need to remain open enough to recognize sincerity if it appears. Because the most beautiful version of this story is not one where someone finally realizes they own your heart. It is one where two independent people recognize that life feels more meaningful when they choose each other freely. And there is something deeply powerful about being chosen freely. No games. No emotional chasing. No endless decoding. Just two people eventually becoming brave enough to say, "This matters to me." Can we understand where it could go? Perhaps that sentence, or something like it, is closer to the truth of this connection than all the dramatic possibilities you have imagined. But there is still one unresolved detail, and it may explain why your intuition has refused to dismiss this person completely. Somewhere in the history between you, there was a turning point. A moment when this person quietly realized that losing your presence would feel different from losing anyone else's. You may not have noticed it when it happened. They may not even have admitted it to themselves immediately. But something changed afterward. Their attention became different. Their hesitation became deeper. Their emotions became harder to hide behind ordinary conversation. And strangely, the clue may have appeared in something incredibly small. Maybe they began asking questions about your future. Maybe they became unusually interested in whether someone else had your attention. Maybe they remembered details about where you wanted to go, what you hoped to build, or the kind of life you imagined for yourself. Not because every question meant romance, but because your future had begun to matter in their private understanding of you. Stay a little longer with that thought. When someone begins imagining your tomorrow, they are no longer seeing you only through the present moment. And perhaps that is where their internal conflict started. Because imagining your future naturally raised another question inside them: would I still be part of it? That question can be surprisingly powerful. It can reveal feelings that casual conversations keep hidden. Yet here is the part that protects your peace: you do not need to answer that question for them. They must answer it through their choices. Your role is not to convince someone that you belong together. Your role is to notice whether both of you are capable of building something healthy, mutual, respectful, and real. And maybe that is exactly why this message found its emotional center here. Don't give up on them does not mean sacrifice yourself for them. It means do not allow temporary confusion to make you cynical about something that may deserve one honest conversation. There is still room for truth. Still room for maturity. Still room for someone to return with clearer intentions than they had before. And if that happens, you will recognize the difference because you will not need to force it. Their effort will speak. Their consistency will speak. The calm you feel around their sincerity will speak. Something important is waiting for you, but perhaps it is not the revelation you originally expected. Perhaps the rare realization is this: the person who truly fits beside you will not require you to stop becoming yourself in order to keep them. They will meet the person you are becoming and decide whether they are prepared to walk beside you. And if this particular person is meant to remain part of your story, that truth will become clearer through mutual action, not endless uncertainty. Still, there is one moment from their side of the story that you have not seen yet. One quiet realization that may have changed the way they have been looking at you ever since. It did not happen during an argument. It did not happen during some dramatic goodbye. It happened when you were simply being yourself, and somehow, without realizing it, you showed them the exact quality they had been searching for in another person. What they recognized in that moment, and why it frightened them enough to become unusually quiet afterward, is where the next part of this story truly begins. There was one ordinary moment that stayed with them far longer than you ever realized. Nothing dramatic happened. No perfect words were exchanged. No grand promise was made. You were simply being yourself, perhaps speaking honestly about something that mattered to you, perhaps showing kindness when you had nothing to gain from it, perhaps refusing to pretend you were someone you were not. And somehow, that small moment reached deeper into them than anything louder ever could. They saw something in you they had been searching for without knowing how to name it. Not perfection. Not someone who would rescue them from every uncertainty. Something much rarer, sincerity. A sense that behind your words there was a real person, someone capable of feeling deeply without turning those feelings into a performance. And after that moment, something became difficult for them to ignore. Stay with this, because the shift did not immediately make them move closer. Strangely, it may have done the opposite. When a connection begins to feel more meaningful than expected, people sometimes become more careful. They begin noticing what they could lose. They become aware that their next decision carries weight. And this person may have reached a point where they could no longer treat you like another passing connection. Suddenly your absence felt noticeable. Your silence seemed louder. The possibility of you moving forward without them started to create a question they could not comfortably dismiss. But they did not know what to do with that realization yet. Perhaps they had spent a long time believing that meaningful relationships should arrive only when everything in life was perfectly arranged. Maybe they thought they needed to have every answer before offering someone their heart. Maybe they had convinced themselves that uncertainty meant they should retreat. Yet you quietly challenged that idea without trying to. Because what they felt around you was not built on perfect circumstances. It appeared in unfinished moments, imperfect conversations, unexpected pauses, and those strange little exchanges that should have been forgettable but somehow remained in their mind. Don't skip, because this is where the title begins to carry a deeper meaning. This person is yours should never mean that another human being belongs to you. It means something gentler. There may be a connection here that deserves to be understood before either of you decides what it truly is. And perhaps the reason your heart has struggled to close the door completely is not because you are supposed to wait endlessly. It may be because part of you recognizes that the story has not yet reached an honest conclusion. There is a difference between unfinished and meant forever. An unfinished connection asks for clarity. A healthy lasting connection asks for mutual effort. And right now, what matters most is recognizing which one this becomes. Somewhere inside this person, a quiet comparison may have started taking place. They began noticing how certain conversations with others left them unchanged, while one simple exchange with you followed them into the rest of their day. They noticed that they could distract themselves from many things, but not always from the questions you awakened. They noticed that when something meaningful happened, there was sometimes an instinct to wonder what you would think about it. Maybe they saw something funny and almost wanted to send it to you. Maybe a song, place, phrase, or memory unexpectedly pulled your name into their thoughts. None of those things alone prove anything. But together, they may have revealed something important to them. Your presence had become emotionally significant. And that realization can be surprisingly unsettling when someone has not yet decided what they are ready for. Imagine the quiet conversation happening inside their own mind. Why do I keep thinking about this person? Why does their opinion matter to me? Why do I feel the distance more than I expected? These are not mystical guarantees. They are ordinary human questions that often appear when a relationship begins to matter. And perhaps this person has been asking some version of them privately. Something important is waiting for you in the next realization, because their hesitation may not be about whether you are enough. It may be about whether they believe they are ready to meet you with the consistency you deserve. That is a very different question. You may have spent time wondering what you did wrong. Maybe you replayed conversations and searched for a sentence that changed everything. Maybe you wondered if being warmer, quieter, more available, less available, more expressive, or more mysterious would have changed their behavior. But sometimes another person's hesitation begins inside their own life rather than inside anything you did. People carry responsibilities, old habits, unfinished lessons, fears about vulnerability, and ideas about love that can make even a beautiful connection feel complicated. That does not excuse poor communication. It does not mean you should accept endless confusion. But it does mean you do not have to turn every pause into a judgment about your worth. There is strength in allowing another person to own their part of the story. And your part is becoming clearer too. The longer you have known this person, the more you may have realized that you do not simply want to be wanted. You want to be understood. You want someone who does not appear only when emotions become intense, but who can remain present when life becomes ordinary. Someone who can communicate instead of leaving you to decode every silence. Someone who can say, "I care," and then allow their behavior to carry the same message. That realization may be changing the energy of this entire connection, because now you are no longer waiting for any version of them. You are waiting only for the version capable of meeting you honestly. Stay till the end, because there is a quiet twist here. The moment this person began to sense that you were becoming less willing to live inside uncertainty may have been the same moment they started seeing your value more clearly. Not because distance is a trick for making someone chase you. Please hear that carefully. Healthy love should never become a game of withdrawal and pursuit. But when you stop over-explaining yourself, stop trying to manage another person's feelings, and simply return your attention to your own life, something changes. The other person finally has space to recognize what your presence actually contributed. And perhaps this person has entered that space. They may be remembering the calm you brought into certain conversations. The way you noticed things others missed. The way you could make a serious moment softer without making it meaningless. The way you listened. The way you challenged them without humiliating them. The way your presence felt strangely familiar even when the connection itself was still new. And one realization may now be sitting quietly beneath all of those memories: I may have underestimated what this person means to me. That thought can change the direction of a relationship, but only if it becomes more than a thought. This is where your discernment matters. Feelings are meaningful, but relationships are built through choices. If this person cares, there eventually has to be movement toward clarity. A message. A conversation. A sincere attempt to understand what happened. An effort to build something healthier than what existed before. You do not need a dramatic declaration. In fact, something much smaller may tell you more. Imagine them returning with a different kind of energy. Not hurried, not confusing, not trying to make promises they cannot keep. Just honest. Perhaps they say, in their own way, I have been thinking about us. I do not want to pretend this meant nothing. Can we talk about where we are? That kind of moment would matter because it does not ask you to surrender your judgment. It invites both of you into reality. And reality is where a true connection has to survive. Something else is unfolding inside you as well. You may be learning that holding hope and holding boundaries can exist at the same time. You can care about this person without arranging your entire life around their next move. You can believe there may still be something worth discovering while continuing to build your own future. You can leave the door unlocked without standing beside it all day. That may be the healthiest meaning of don't give up. Do not give up on love simply because this chapter became confusing. Do not give up on your standards because you miss someone. Do not give up on your own growth because you are waiting for clarity. And do not give up on the possibility that this person could surprise you with maturity, but allow them to prove it naturally. There is something beautifully different about a connection that returns after both people have had time to understand themselves. Sometimes the second conversation carries more truth than the first 100. Because now there is history. There are consequences. There is a clearer understanding of what silence creates and what communication can repair. Perhaps if the two of you speak again, you will notice something changed in the way they listen. Maybe they will no longer rush past the difficult subjects. Maybe they will ask what you actually need rather than assuming they already know. Maybe they will finally explain the moment when they started pulling away. And if they do, you could discover that the reason was far less about losing interest and far more about becoming overwhelmed by what the connection was asking them to face inside themselves. Yet there is another possibility too, and it deserves respect. Clarity may show you that the connection was meaningful but not meant to continue in the way you hoped. Even that would not make the story a failure. Sometimes a person enters your life to reveal what your heart is capable of, what standards you need, and what kind of communication you will no longer compromise on. But something about this particular story still feels unfinished because there is one piece of information you have not heard from their side. And that piece centers on a conversation they may have had with someone they trust. Not a dramatic secret meeting. Not anything threatening. Just one honest moment when another person noticed something different about them and asked a simple question: why does this person affect you so much? They may have laughed it off at first. They may have changed the subject. They may have claimed they were fine. But eventually, something slipped through. A sentence they had never said aloud before. A realization they had been carrying privately. And the person listening may have understood immediately what your soulmate, or this person who means so much to you, was still struggling to admit. They were not confused because there was nothing there. They were confused because there was enough there to make the decision matter. That distinction changed something. Suddenly the question was no longer, do I care about them? It became, what am I going to do about the fact that I care? And that is the question that may shape whatever happens next. Perhaps this person is reaching a point where thinking is no longer enough. Perhaps they are beginning to understand that if they want a place in your life, they cannot simply assume you will keep that place open forever. They must approach it with respect. They must speak honestly. They must show up. And meanwhile, you are becoming someone who can receive that truth without losing yourself inside it. That is why your growth has been part of this story from the beginning. The connection may have drawn your attention toward them, but the deeper journey has been drawing you back toward yourself. Toward your confidence. Toward emotional clarity. Toward the understanding that the love you deserve should add depth to your life, not remove your peace from it. So if they come closer, you will see them differently now. You will not only ask, do they want me? You will ask, can we communicate? Can we trust each other? Can we grow together? Can this connection become peaceful as well as exciting? Those questions are not less romantic. They are what allow romance to become something real. And somewhere in the middle of all this, this person may be preparing themselves for a conversation they once avoided. Not because a mysterious force is pushing them toward you, but because unresolved feelings eventually ask for honesty. They may realize there are words they owe you, not promises, not guarantees, just truth. What they felt. Why they hesitated. What they misunderstood. What they noticed about you after the distance began. And perhaps the most meaningful thing they could admit is surprisingly simple. I thought stepping back would make this easier. It didn't. Think about what that would reveal. Not that destiny has been proven. Not that every obstacle disappears. But that the connection mattered enough to survive inside their thoughts even when they tried to place it aside. And if that admission ever arrives, you will have a choice too. You can listen without immediately deciding. You can allow the conversation to unfold slowly. You can ask what has actually changed. You can notice whether their actions match the awareness they are expressing. Because this time, the story does not need to be rushed. Something genuine can withstand questions. It can withstand boundaries. It can withstand two people taking enough time to understand whether what they feel can become something healthy. And perhaps that is where the rarest kind of connection begins, not in certainty, but in two people becoming courageous enough to exchange confusion for honesty. Yet there is one detail from that private conversation that has not surfaced yet. When the person they trusted asked what they were most afraid of losing, your name was not the first thing they said. Their first answer was something completely unexpected. But once they explained it, everything about their silence, their hesitation, and the way they have been carrying this connection began to make sense. And that answer may reveal what they truly believe could happen if they finally let themselves move closer to you.